this show, and I'm always appreciative when they're willing to come in studio and have a good conversation. The guy we have with us right now, well, he's an author, he's a public speaker, and he also is the former Nevada Attorney General. It's a pleasure having George Chanos joining us in studio. George, I really do appreciate you being here. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me.
And you brought gifts, right? I've got one of his books, which is cool. You've written 2 books now. You've been out of office now for how many years?
15.
15 years. Do you miss it?
Not at all.
Why?
It's toxic. It's dysfunctional. It's polarizing. It's not a lifestyle that I choose to have.
I can understand why you would say that, especially in the times right now. Do you feel like it's gotten worse? Because I feel like it's gotten worse.
Oh, no, it's gotten much worse.
Why? Why do you think it has, George?
Because a lot has to do with media. I think that people have their perspectives, their ideological viewpoints, and they go into, we all want to be loved. We all want to be affirmed, right? And so we go into echo chambers that affirm our beliefs and our views. We follow podcasts that affirm our beliefs and our views. And this hardens people's biases, right? So if you're left of center, you're either watching CNN all the time, or you're watching MSNBC, right? Or you're reading the New York Times. If you're right of center, you're watching Fox, you're reading the Wall Street Journal. And what happens is we go into these silos, these echo chambers, and they harden our perspectives. They reinforce our pre-existing biases because they play to our confirmation biases.
I use that term echo chamber a lot, particularly when I talk about talk radio.
Yeah.
99% of talk radio is conservative talk radio. And I say, why? I used to watch Hannity and Combs. Why? Because you had 2 different sides. I used to watch Crossfire when Tucker Carlson was somewhat normal.
Yeah.
I like to hear different sides. In fact, even though I lean to the left on social issues, I voted for 8 Republicans in 2022. I didn't vote for Hillary. I didn't vote for Barack Obama. But looking back on it, I think I made a mistake when it came to Hillary. But I agree with you. I want to hear both sides, right? And I think that's really important. The problem is there are at times, and you're right, certain members of the media, they lie.
Yeah.
They intentionally lie, and they care more about ratings than telling the truth, right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And it's really disappointing. I want to get your thoughts on this, and I know you're not privy to the information that the current Nevada Attorney General has, but still, with your legal expertise, I wanted to ask you about this. What do you make of this alleged fake electorate scheme where you had this indictment of 5 people, including Mike McDonald, who is still the head of the Republican Party chair here? What do you make of this case, at least what's come out publicly, which it seems like there's some evidence there. Ford already made public some of the things. What do you make of this case, and do you think it's a strong case? What are your opinions on it in general?
I don't really have any. And the reason that I don't have any is because I haven't looked at it to a degree that would allow me to formulate a cogent opinion. Number one. Number two, I wouldn't want to really comment on something that's ongoing that the Attorney General is now dealing with. But to the extent that anyone in Nevada has violated the law, they ought to be prosecuted. They ought to be held accountable. I don't know enough about it, really, to tell you whether or not that's the case here. I have my suspicions, but they're
do I.
Yeah.
I understand.
They're not grounded in any real discovery of information.
It's interesting, George, because a lot of friends of mine that are Republicans, I would like to think of them as Reagan Republicans, and I sort of see you as that. Do you define yourself as like more of a? You're not really a MAGA Republican. You're a Reagan Republican.
I'm an Abraham Lincoln Republican.
And you believe, and you've said this before, which I appreciate, that Republicans, at least Republicans like yourself, believe in liberty and freedom.
Right.
Right? When you see what took place on January 6th, I want to know, as the former Nevada Attorney General, what was going through your mind when you saw what took place that day?
I don't think of January 6th in the same way that the media has presented it. I don't believe it was, it depends on how you define an insurrection, right? It clearly wasn't a military or an armed coup of any type. It wasn't. It was really a bunch of people that got overexcited, that stepped over the line, that went into public building and trespassed, and violated the law and should have been prosecuted for violating the law.
A lot of them were.
Yeah, 900 or 1,000
Yeah.
of them were, yeah.
Sure.
But if it were a true insurrection, and if Donald Trump, for example, were guilty of a true insurrection, then I believe he would have been prosecuted by the Justice Department for that. So that to me doesn't rise to the level of what I define as a true insurrection.
But with
right?
that being said, you would still prosecute those
I would
who
still
attack
prosecute.
police officers?
I would 100%.
Gotcha. Okay.
100%.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets a little sticky when
Yeah,
the
yeah.
law is concerned, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about Donald Trump, and I want to
Yeah.
pick your brain on this.
Yeah.
Because I think you would agree with me, if Donald Trump didn't say the election was stolen, if he didn't say Joe Biden cheated and the Democrats cheating, obviously January 6th doesn't happen. Can we agree on that at least?
Probably.
Probably not. Okay. So, obviously,
I don't think that you can hold him legally responsible for what happened on January 6th. I believe that, one could arrive at the conclusion that he has some responsibility for what happened, but not a legally chargeable
gotcha.
responsibility.
So pertaining to maybe things he said before, what would you define it as, a riot, not an insurrection?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not, a trespass.
Okay.
A trespass that
with assaults,
resulted in damage and
And-
injury.
Correct. Okay. So let's take that
Yeah.
and let's move forward now to his actions after it started legally.
Yeah.
From based on all the testimony and
Yeah.
the people that were around the president for almost 5 hours.
Yeah.
See, this is where I have a big problem.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything.
That's a different
Right.
question.
What do you make of that?
I would classify that as a dereliction of duty.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
And, when I talk to people about whether it's an insurrection or not, and I get into the weeds with them on it, and obviously I respect your opinion, this is just me. I don't care the way people label it. What I try to say is it was an embarrassing day for the country.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stupid people
Yeah.
that did a lot of stupid, violent things that
Yeah.
day. Donald Trump,
Yeah.
I agree with what you just said.
Yeah.
Didn't act upon or do enough. It was a scary day for a lot of people that were in there. I've spoken to some politicians that were in there. When you hear people saying, hang Mike Pence, really an embarrassing day for the country. And I know you would never characterize it as such, but when I hear the MAGA Republicans, which you're not, say it was a tourist visit
Yeah.
and it was provoked by Antifa or George Soros, or they
Yeah.
blame Nancy Pelosi, I get really frustrated with that. I think everything you said is very reasonable.
Yeah.
But I hear some of these people say those things. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was illegal. I think it was wrong. I think it ought to be condemned as being wrong. I don't, again, as I've stated, I wouldn't classify it in my interpretation as an insurrection. And I do believe that he failed in his duty to come out more quickly and put a stop to it. Other than that,
Why do you think more Republicans don't say that?
because I think that Republicans, by and large, are sick and tired and fed up of what they feel is an overreaching assault on this individual over a period of time. From the
Trump,
day,
you're talking about.
Trump. From the day he got elected, the resistance was formed. Right, the Democrat side, the resistance was formed, and there was an opposition to him that was unrelenting for his entire term in office. Now, this has gone back and forth. Some could say the same thing happened with Republicans towards Clinton or with Republicans towards Obama.
Right.
But it wasn't quite at this level, right? I was alive seeing it all, right? I saw what happened with Clinton, I saw what happened with Obama, and I saw what happened with Trump. I don't believe that you can equate the three. I think it was over the top. It has been over the top with Trump.
Can you give me an example, like a legal example?
Yeah,
of what you're talking about?
I think that first of all, I don't want to be a defender of Donald Trump. Okay,
Understood. That would be hard to do.
Yeah. Well, there are arguments that can be made on his behalf, but I don't really want to be the guy making them. Right. There are good things about him and there are bad things about him. There are good things about Joe Biden and there are bad things about Joe Biden, right?
You're talking personally, or are you talking policy?
I'm talking personally, policy, professionally, in every sense of the word. There are good things about both men and there are bad things about both men, right?
What's bad about Joe Biden personally?
Oh,
I want to
God.
pick your brain. No,
Okay.
this is
Yeah.
important. I want to pick your brain.
Well, the problem is that I really, we're talking about people,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And there are bigger things to talk about, like issues,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Rather than personalities or people. But I think, I've met Joe Biden 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
When was the last time you met him?
Well, probably about 5 years ago.
Oh, so not that long ago.
Yeah.
Before he ran. Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I've got pictures on my
How was
phone
that
with
interaction?
him. I liked him when I first met him.
Mhm.
I actually liked him, and I had great hopes for him. I thought that he had a reputation in the United States Senator as being a broker of compromise. Right? He was able to work across the aisle, and I had hoped that that's what he would do when he became president. He didn't do that. And for whatever reason, he needed to, coalesce with his base. He needed to, build, the level of support within the Democratic Party that he felt he needed to accomplish what he hoped to accomplish. For whatever reason, Joe Biden never really reached across the aisle, not in the way that he did in the 40 prior years in the United States Senate, right? And that was very disappointing to me because I thought that he had the capacity and the potential to actually bring this country together. And
Can I ask you a question in
Yeah.
regards to that?
Yeah.
And I'll just give an example. The
Yeah.
bipartisan bill, immigration bill. I understand not everybody's happy with it.
yeah,
And tell me if you disagree with
too
me.
little, too late.
Perhaps, and I think it's a failing on both sides.
Yeah.
But I agree with you.
Yeah.
Probably should have happened much sooner. But I feel like there's a lot of pushback from the right. When Donald Trump says he wants the economy to crumble, which he said a few weeks ago, and he tells MAGA Republicans, House Republicans, that don't pass this bill, I feel like there are a ton of, not you, but a lot of people in office, Republicans, that don't want Joe Biden to succeed. They don't want to
Yeah.
pass a bill that would help
Yeah.
the country. So while I'm not saying Joe Biden is perfect, and I
Yeah.
have my criticisms for him as well,
Yeah.
I feel like he gets a lot of pushback from Republicans, and it's difficult for him to pass bills when Republicans don't want to pass some of the bills put forth.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
think about something for a minute. Today, I would give him nothing. I would agree to nothing
Why?
with him because because of what he's done during the prior 3 years. So, and I am a moderate. Okay, I'm a centrist. I really am. I'm pro some level of gun control. Right.
Right.
I'm pro LGBTQ.
Okay.
I'm pro choice. Right.
Which
I'm not.
most Republicans are not.
Yeah, I'm not your typical Republican.
I got you. So you're a
And-
moderate Republican.
Yeah,
But when you say you'll give him
he's
nothing,
gotten me to the point.
Yeah.
He's gotten me to the point where I would give him nothing.
even if it was a bill that helped the country?
I want him to leave office. I want him to leave office as quickly as possible. And I don't want Trump to be his replacement.
Gotcha.
Okay? But I would rather have Trump than him at this point.
Even if-
anything other than him.
Even if there was a bill that you knew would help the country,
Well, I don't believe that that's that bill. First
Okay,
of all.
but forget about that bill.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
in general terms.
Yeah.
If there was a bill put forth that would help the country, helping our military, health care, whatever the case is, a bill that could actually, save lives.
Yeah,
Gun control bill.
Then yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's not like you wouldn't.
No.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I think that the bill that he's proposed, even though it's a bipartisan bill, is not the right bill on immigration. I think that more needs to be done on immigration. I think the man has already allowed 8 million people to come in this country. I think that that's potentially devastating to the school systems, to the medical systems. American citizens are, dying on the streets from homelessness, right? We've got veterans that are on the streets that nobody's putting them up in hotels, right? And yet you've got people who come over here illegally who are being put up in hotels. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. I believe that an elected representative owes a fiduciary duty to the American citizens who elected him, first and foremost, and to the country, right? Joe Biden has gotten us into wars. He's gotten us into a proxy war in Ukraine, okay? Something I don't believe Trump would have done, all right? Trump was against the war in Iraq, right? He's not a hawk. He's not a neocon. He's against war generally. So I don't believe we would be involved in a war in Ukraine. I don't believe we need to be involved in a war in Ukraine. I believe that a negotiated arrangement could and should be made with Vladimir Putin. If we could sit down with Joseph Stalin in Yalta, Churchill and Roosevelt could sit down with Stalin and could negotiate a deal, then, telling me that Vladimir Putin is a murderer and that he's done these terrible things, Stalin killed arguably 20 million people, right? But we could negotiate a deal with him.
But when have we ever negotiated with Vladimir Putin where he's been honest and sincere?
He doesn't have to be.
He never has been.
He doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to be. All that has to happen is we have to negotiate a deal that accomplishes what it is that we want to accomplish.
Do you trust Putin in doing that? And sitting down at the table with
I don't
him?
have to trust him. I can rely on his self-interest. It's the nature of the deal that would be negotiated, right? So if you could get Vladimir Putin to withdraw from the Donbass region, if you could get him to surrender Crimea, if you could get him to pay reparations to Ukraine, and if you could get him to remain out of Ukraine, wouldn't you want that?
Yeah, but I don't think you can do that.
I think you can do that, and here's the difference. I've been negotiating for 40 years. I've studied negotiation at Harvard in 1995 and 1996. I've lectured on it, I've written on it, and I believe you can do that. I believe you can do all of that.
But I think and I respect that about you and your education, but I
Yeah.
think there's a far difference between getting an education at Harvard and sitting down with an evil, murderous dictator, which is exactly who Vladimir Putin is, and I think it's important. Why is it that Donald Trump never calls Vladimir Putin a dictator? Why is it that it has to be Joe Biden that says that, but yet when it comes to Donald Trump, and again, I'm just telling you what he said yesterday.
Yeah.
Trump blamed America for the death of this hero that was in prison.
Yeah.
He blamed America.
Yeah.
Joe Biden is the first guy that blamed Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I totally disagree with everything that you're saying, but
what do you get from blaming Vladimir Putin, right? Especially if you're trying to negotiate with him.
I can answer that by saying honesty.
Well, okay.
Honesty.
Yeah,
not
but-
kissing ass to, for lack of a better term, to an evil, murderous dictator.
Yeah, but what is your objective? What is your objective? My objective would be to have Ukrainians stop losing the lives of their youth, right? The young men that are dying out in the mud.
Absolutely.
Right? That would be my
Doesn't mean we have to. I agree with you, but can't we do both?
No, I don't think you can. I think that if you engage in this, Vladimir Putin is a ruthless dictator, tyrant, killer, murderer, how are you going to then negotiate with the guy, right?
Well,
it doesn't advance the cause of getting him to pull out. It doesn't advance the cause of his surrendering Crimea. It doesn't advance the cause of trying to save the lives of reversing the 10 million refugees that have left Ukraine. I mean, this country has been devastated by what has occurred, and it was needless. It didn't need to happen.
Well, listen, I think we agree on everything you said about getting out of Ukraine. It's horrible for the world. It's horrible for this country. We agree on that. I think where we disagree is how do we get there? And your position is, well, we need to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. And my opinion on that is, in the history of Vladimir Putin as the president of Russia, running that country, the Kremlin, he has never honestly negotiated really with anybody in his entire life. He murders people that disagree with him.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very difficult to do that and to trust him. That's just my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean,
so I have a very different view on negotiation, right? And it's not about Vladimir Putin. It's not about personalities. You can negotiate with the devil. You can negotiate with anyone, right? It's the question of people act out of self-interest. Milton Friedman at the University of Chicago won a Nobel Prize for this observation. If you want someone to do something, appeal to their self-interest. Vladimir Putin is not going to do anything for anyone else, but he will do something for himself. So if you make it in his self-interest to give you the deal that you want, then you can get the deal that you want. So the question is, how do you make it in his self-interest? Then you don't have to rely on his honesty or on his integrity or on anything else. He's going to do what is in his self-interest.
Do you agree with Vivek Ramaswamy when he said we should negotiate but give Vladimir Putin parts of Ukraine, of the country that he invaded?
I don't think you need to do that. I think that's a poor negotiation. I think that's what Vivek may believe is required to get a deal. I don't believe that that's required to get a deal. As I said, I believe that you can get him to withdraw from the Donbass. I believe that you can get him to surrender Crimea. And I believe that even more than those two things that Vivek would never believe could happen, I believe that you could get him to pay reparations to Ukraine through a negotiated settlement.
And you think Joe Biden should be sitting down with Vladimir Putin and negotiating with him?
I don't think Joe Biden is capable any more than Vivek is capable, because Vivek has said he doesn't think it's possible unless you gave him some land, right? So that tells me he could not negotiate the deal that I just articulated. There's no way Joe Biden could negotiate the deal, or he would, right? Possibly Trump could negotiate that deal. I believe that deal can be negotiated. You know how it can be negotiated?
How?
All right. So first of all, what does Putin want? What does Putin want? Think about what he wants.
Well, I think it's pretty simple. He wants to run the world.
Well,
he's a dictator.
See, but that's wrong. That's wrong.
You don't think that?
No, that's the narrative that we've all been fed.
Why did he invade Ukraine?
He invaded Ukraine because Vladimir Putin appeared at the Munich Security Conference in 2007. In 2007, he appeared at the Munich Security Conference, and he spoke to the NATO members. And he said that Ukraine was a red line, right? That you've grown from 11-member NATO, I mean a 12-member NATO. You were formed as a 12-member NATO. You're now growing, towards 30 members. Now we're at 31, right? Who are you afraid of? Why are you moving east? Is it because of us, right? In 1980, Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State was a guy named James Baker. James Baker said that China was the real threat and that we ought to invite Russia to join NATO because they have the longest contiguous border with China. That Russia should have been made part of NATO. Russia always wanted to be part of NATO. All of its leaderships from Gorbachev on all forward wanted to become part of NATO, including Putin. We didn't welcome them to the club. Instead, we invited everyone that was part of the former broken Soviet Union into NATO, except Russia, right? We excluded them. Number one, why did we exclude them? Okay, that's the first issue. And it's not because he's a murderous, crazy guy. 15 years ago, that was not the rationale, okay? The reason that we have ostracized Russia, that the West has ostracized Russia, is economic. Think about who the leading powers are in Europe, right? You've got Britain, you've got France, you've got Germany. Now it's moving east. You've got Poland, you've got Finland, right? These countries want to maintain economic dominance of Europe. They don't want everyone buying their grain or their oil from Russia. We don't want Europeans buying their grain or their oil from Russia. So it's an economic issue. We want to exclude Russia from the European economy, from the Western economy. We want to make them weaker economically. That's been our objective this entire time. So what Putin wants most is the opposite. He wants to be part of the West. He wants to be welcomed.
He wants to be the West, I think.
No, he really doesn't. Let me tell you why that's wrong. Prior to the invasion, Putin had an economy the size of Italy. That's like telling me that Italy wants to reconstitute the Roman Empire, right? It's just fantasy. He doesn't have the economic wherewithal to do what he's been alleged to have as his ambition, right? So he was never going to invade Europe. He was never going to do any of these things. There are two motivating factors for Ukraine. One is to weaken Russia economically, so that in the event that there is a war between the United States and China, Russia will not be a formidable ally of China. So weaken them economically and militarily. That's part of our objective. The idea is that Ukraine is a low-cost, high ROI way to dismantle or damage the Russia and Putin, okay? So we will fight that battle to the last Ukrainian life. We don't give a shit about the Ukrainians that are dying. And I think we should, okay? Number one. Number two, we want to exclude the European players want to exclude Russia from becoming an economic force in Europe. They don't want everyone buying from him. They want them buying from them. We want them buying from us. So there's a lot of economics here. There's also the military-industrial complex that Kennedy warned us about and Eisenhower warned us about, a Democratic president and a Republican president, and they were right to do so. You know, you look at today, there was a 4-hour exchange of missiles between the Houthi rebels and the United States government. The Houthi rebels are sending off missiles that cost about $100,000 apiece. We're countering with missiles that cost $32 million apiece. Every time we fire a $32 million missile, you know what that means? It means it needs to be replaced. It means that there needs to be an increased military defense spending budget, right? So we are sending all of our old arms, all of our old artillery shells, which we won't be using in future wars because future wars won't be fought with artillery shells. They'll be fought with laptop computers. They'll be fought with drones. We are giving Ukraine all of this you know,
aid.
No longer relevant military equipment, and using it to test and to degrade Russia. So we're getting a lot of strategic information about how Russia fights, how they respond, what they're able to do, what they're not able to do, what the drone attacks are capable of accomplishing against them, what they're not accomplishing against them, the communication strategies, the satellites. All of these issues, we're gathering tremendous intelligence. This is why we're fighting the war. It serves multiple causes. Number one, it degrades Russia and makes them a less formidable threat in the event that there's a problem with China. Number two, it keeps them a poorly performing economy that doesn't threaten the incumbent players in Europe. Number three, it stacks the coffers or adds to the coffers of the Raytheons and the Northrop Grummons and the General Dynamicses of the world, the military-industrial complex.
But to be clear, though,
yeah,
you want Ukraine to win this war. I don't want Russia to win this war.
I don't want there to be a war.
Obviously. I don't either.
I don't want there to be a war.
I understand.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
But
there is one.
Yeah,
the reality of the situation is there is one.
Then my answer is we need to stop it. We need to resolve it.
Of
We need to
course.
negotiate it.
I agree with you 100%.
So I don't want either one to win the war.
You don't want Ukraine to win
I do
this
not
war.
want Ukraine to win, and I do not want Russia to win. I do not want there to be a victor in the war. I want the war to end, and I want people to live and collaborate and cooperate
I hear
peacefully.
you, George. I hear you. But the part that's confusing to me is Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia is the one that started this, just like Hamas started the situation in the Middle East.
So that's a different story. So first of all, if you look at my Facebook feed, you'll see that I called the exact day, February 24th, that Russia would invade Ukraine. More than a month before the invasion, I called the day that it would happen on. Okay, I've been following this for a long time. I've read his speech in 2007, right? Do you know who John Mearsham is?
I do not.
Okay. John Mearsham is the world's leading authority on Russia and Ukraine. He's a professor at the University of Chicago. Listen to him. Listen to what he says. The world's leading academic on this subject is blaming the United States, saying that the United States and NATO provoked Putin into the invasion. We provoked him. We knew since 2007 that Ukraine was a red line. It's like Cuba and the United States, right? Russia was trying to install missiles in Cuba. We said that that was intolerable. We said we would never allow that to happen. We were willing to go to war. Kennedy set up a blockade to prevent that. There are certain situations in which sovereign nations, where you have a world power and you have another sovereign nation, right? You want to generally have a rule of respecting the rights of all sovereign nations. But there are situations in which you're the neighbor of a superpower, and the superpower, like we did with Cuba, is going to draw a red line.
I hear you.
Okay. All right. So Putin drew that red line.
I hear you, but I'm an outsider looking in here.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm an outsider looking in here. And when I hear the stories of Russian soldiers raping women while their children watch. There's video of
But
it.
that's all you're hearing. You're not hearing about Ukrainian.
That's not what I'm hearing. There's video of
But
it.
you're not hearing about Ukrainian atrocities in the West. We're not getting that media.
If there's atrocities that Ukrainian soldiers are committing as well, then
Yeah.
I have just as much a problem with that. When Liz Cheney said the other day
Yeah.
that there is a Putin wing of the right Republican Party,
Yeah.
do you agree or disagree with her statement?
No, I think she's an idiot
Why is she an idiot?
because she said that.
I mean, she's a very conservative woman. I disagree with her on a number of policy issues, but she believes that there is a wing of the Republican Party
It's
that is
ridiculous.
rooting for Putin to win.
No, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There's a wing of the Republican Party that is rooting for Biden to lose and for this administration to be held accountable for its errors. But there's no one that, people are called Putin apologists. Why aren't they called Biden apologists?
Well, I wouldn't compare Vladimir Putin to Joe Biden.
Well,
I think that's very unfair.
Well, look at the facts. The facts are that NATO has expanded from 12 countries to 31 countries, right? We have an Article 5 defense obligation to every one of those NATO countries, right? So if Putin or Russia gets into any kind of a conflict with any one of those 31 countries, our military becomes contractually, by treaty, obligated to become involved.
But you wouldn't compare Joe Biden to Vladimir Putin.
No, I wouldn't.
No.
How is American security advanced by an Article 5 obligation with Estonia or Lithuania, right? It's one thing when we've got 12 major countries that we have a pact with, that if any of these 12 major countries that represent a significant defense advantage, right, get into a problem.
I guess where I go from here is I believe Vladimir Putin is a threat to this country. I believe he's a threat to the world. In his country,
He is now.
if you text I know people in Russia. They've
yeah.
told me this. If you text something to a family member
Yeah.
in opposition of Vladimir in any
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
shape, or form,
Yeah.
you go to jail for 25 years.
Yeah.
People like that, we're safer if he's not on the planet. I feel the same way about Kim Jong-un. I believe you don't think the world is safer without Vladimir Putin?
No,
Why?
because the guy that is his military minister of defense is much worse, right? So you eliminate Vladimir Putin, who do you think's next?
Well, then you take them both out.
Well,
I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
That's not the answer. That's not the answer. You got to think about something. This is not 1944. Okay, this is 2024. Okay, we are living in a post-nuclear, pre-singularity environment. Okay, we don't have the luxury to be playing with matches like we did in 1944.
Yeah.
Okay, he has 6,000 nuclear weapons, and it's not him. This isn't about personalities. It's not about Vladimir Putin. It's a sovereign nation that has a 1,000-year history plus history, that has 6,000 nuclear warheads. And within the next 5 years, a country is going to reach what's called the singularity, right? That moment in time when machine intelligence will eclipse human intelligence, and then all bets are off. Putin in 2017 said, "He who controls artificial intelligence will control the world." That same year, China announced its intention to be the leader in AI by 2030. Ray Kurzweil, the head of artificial intelligence for Google, tells us that we will reach the singularity by 2029. He tells us that by the 2040s, artificial intelligence will not be our equal. It will be a billion times more capable than artificial intelligence. Here's my point.
Yeah.
It's a different game. We're in a different world. Right? We're in a very, very different world. And the idea that we use 19th century approaches towards solving conflicts or pre-19th century approaches of war in solving conflicts, to me, is incredibly ignorant and dangerous. It's not the answer. So taking guys out, or bombing countries or sending them cluster bombs or sending them F-16s or sending them Patriot missile defense systems, that's not the answer. The answer is, how can we as a global population, how can we work together? How can we collaborate? How can we take AI and create abundance for the 7.5 billion souls on this planet? How can we do that? That's what I'm interested in.
If you're just joining us, by the way, he is George Chanos. He is the former Nevada Attorney General. We are talking about the war, Ukraine-Russia. We fundamentally agree, obviously, and I would hope most Americans would agree with us. We don't want this war. We want it to end. We want peace. We don't want innocent people to die. We obviously fundamentally agree on that. I think where we disagree is where we get there. I don't think Donald Trump is the answer. He said, I'll pick up the phone and it'll be over in 24 hours. I think he's full of crap, quite frankly, for lack of a better term, and his ego involved. I don't think Donald Trump is more capable of ending this war any more than a Joe Biden is. And yes, I'll just say it out loud. Vladimir Putin's an evil, murderous dictator. I think the world is a better place without him. I think we disagree on that as well. I'm not saying everybody in Ukraine is innocent either, but again, they're the ones who invaded Ukraine. And I would say the same thing in sort of a different scenario, of course, in the Middle East. But Hamas butchered a bunch of innocent Israelis.
Yeah, you know why?
Well, first of all, it's genocide.
Yeah.
They don't believe that Israel should exist. And
Yeah.
by the way, a lot of Palestinians feel that way as well.
Yeah, but why on October 7th?
Why on
Why
October
did it
7th?
happen? Why did it happen now?
Well, tell me why. Why do you think it happened?
Ukraine.
But Hamas, in the history since in the mid-'80s, they've committed horrible atrocities.
Never anything like this.
This was certainly the 9/11, I think, of Israel. I would
Yeah.
tend to agree with you there.
And the timing, right? So you understand that Iran is a client
Sure.
of Russia,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So, and you understand what we're doing to Russia, correct?
Yeah.
And do you expect that Russia is not going to respond or has not already responded by picking up the phone and sending emissaries to
Well,
Iran?
I've been the first one to say we should not be supporting the Iranian government. We shouldn't be sending them any money. They've supported Hamas, and I'm with you on that one 150%.
Putin called the leadership in Iran and said, you know, if you want to unleash Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels against Israel, now will be a time, and we'll back you. Okay? And that's why they did what they did. Why would Hamas go in? They knew, they had to know that the response from the Israeli government would be devastating, right? They knew this. You don't go in and do what they did on October 7th and not expect an overwhelming draconian response, which is exactly what happened. What that tells me is that they wanted that response. They wanted that
possible.
response. They
Sure.
wanted that response because they wanted to turn world public opinion against Israel.
Sure.
That's what they wanted. And they wanted to, you know, attack Israel for generations, right?
Sure.
So, but the arrangement, they're not going to do that without someone like Russia and China saying that we have your back. More importantly, look at the meeting that took place that was brokered by China after the invasion of Ukraine. China, of all countries, not the United States, met with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Do you remember that? Right?
I do.
Yeah. Historical, right? When have you seen China put together any kind of a major peace initiative or any kind of a major, dialogue like that with of all people, the Iranians and the Saudis, right? What do you think the conversation was at that meeting, right? China agreed to a no-limits partnership
Right.
with Russia. Now they're bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia together, and they're talking. And what do you think they're saying? At the same time, Saudi Arabia, who used to be our biggest weapons purchaser, right, exceeded all purchases of all other countries, now they have a defense pact after the invasion of Ukraine. Now they have a defense pact with Russia and an arms purchasing agreement with Russia. What had to have been said at that meeting between the Saudis and Iran was Iran let them know what was going to happen and told them to stand down. That's what I think happened.
I guess when it comes to, and I think you would probably, I just don't think Donald Trump is the savior that's going to get the world out of all these problems.
I would agree.
just don't.
I would agree with you when you say that Donald Trump saying I'd get this done in 24 hours
it's ridiculous.
is ridiculous.
It's absurd.
Right? It's ridiculous.
But let me ask you this in regards to
But
Trump.
that doesn't mean it can't be done. And that doesn't mean he's not the better guy to do it.
It doesn't mean it can't be done, but the guy that you say is the better guy to do it is also the guy that wants to rip up parts of our Constitution. It's the guy that's facing 91 felonies. It's the guy that has really no regard for the law, as far as I'm concerned. Still says that the election was stolen. This is the guy that's selling gold sneakers. Is that the guy that you think would do a better job than Joe Biden?
I think anyone would. I'd rather have a dog defecating in the Oval Office than Joe Biden.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the economy. Let's talk about, well, before I even ask you, anything Joe Biden's done good in the last 3 years? Anything you could say, well, he did a good job there?
Jesus.
Infrastructure bill, was that bad?
No, there was the Justice Department just went after a bunch of fraudsters in New York and shut down like 80 people that were committing fraud.
Yep.
I think that was good. Anytime there are prosecutions of people that are committing fraud, I think is good. So I applaud the Justice Department for that.
So you would agree with me if Donald Trump is prosecuted for fraud, that would be good?
If Donald Trump actually committed a crime,
if he's convicted.
If he actually committed a crime, he ought to be prosecuted and he ought to be convicted.
Okay, well, we certainly agree on that. Infrastructure bill, the bill that help put health care in the hands of our brave men and women in uniform, Jon Stewart, Joe Biden, they worked on a bill that actually did pass. Inflation was up the yin-yang 3 years ago. It's now down to...
No. Inflation was 1% under Trump, and then it went up to 8% under Joe Biden.
Of course. It was because of COVID. Of course, the reason why inflation...
No, it's not. It's not because of COVID. It's because of printing money. It's because of endless printing money, stimulus checks.
But the entire world, George, inflation was up throughout the entire world at that time.
Well, not like it was here. Not an 8% jump.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm just, George, with all due respect, that's not correct. I mean, inflation was up all over the world, higher than 8% in other countries. And what we compare our country to, compared to the other countries that we compare ourselves to, inflation is now down to 3% since 2021. You don't give Joe Biden any credit for that, or the unemployment numbers.
You want me to give him credit for... He increased inflation from 1% to 8%.
How did he increase it?
And
what
then
policies?
brought it down.
How did he increase it?
Spending, stimulus.
But what do you mean, do you see all the money Donald Trump spent in 4 years?
Both of them.
But you're putting that on Biden.
But you still had inflation at 1%, even with that spending.
Well, yeah, because of COVID, it was down low around the world.
You can't blame everything on COVID.
I'm not blaming everything on COVID, but I think when it comes to inflation, COVID was a big part of it.
Well, you have to agree with me. Donald Trump, can give the same excuse that his spending was related to COVID.
COVID ruined the economy. There's no question. I agree with you on that. I don't blame Donald Trump for COVID. I blame him for his reaction to COVID. 15 cases down to 0. It's going to be gone by Easter. He used his press conferences as political campaign rallies. He talked about injecting yourself with disinfectant, and then he wants to get credit for the vaccines, yet he gets it privately with his wife. And this far right, I don't understand where it comes from. People with no medical experience, anti-vaccines. All I'm saying is the economy went from inflation, and you're right, over 8% to now 3%. We have the lowest unemployment rate.
All of these positives that you're talking about in the economy followed negatives that were created by this administration. So I don't give him credit for reversing the negatives that he created. And I'm not saying that he created all of them. And I'm not saying that COVID didn't play a role. And I'm not saying that Trump didn't increase spending as well. I'm saying that both of these administrations overspent, undertaxed, and caused an increase in inflation. And I don't attribute it all to COVID by any stretch.
Okay. Well, I mean, listen, we could agree to disagree on that, but I think when there's when the economy is shut down, gas prices go up when we're coming out of COVID. Obviously,
well, some would argue that Trump would not have shut things down the way Biden did.
Well, but Biden didn't shut things down. As you know, the governors are the ones that shut things down. Biden didn't have any authority to shut things down.
Well, Democratic governors and
Republican governors shut things down.
But a lot of Republican governors didn't, right?
Okay, I mean, I would say that the entire country at one point was shut down, and there were a lot of Republican governors. Biden didn't have the authority, neither did Trump, by the way. Trump didn't have the authority to shut things down. There's a lot of other topics I want to get to with you, and
Yeah, go ahead.
of course, you know, I want to talk about what you're doing with Evolution.io. I do want to get to that as
Yeah.
well. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with George Chanos. He is the former Nevada Attorney General. Good conversation. Talk a little bit about your book as well. Why don't we do this, if that's
Yeah, yeah.
okay with you? If you can stick around a little longer.
Yeah, of course.
Good conversation. I really enjoy talking
Yeah.
to you. What I want to do is open up the phone lines as well. We're going to take a break, but I'm going to give out the number.
Yeah, yeah.
70. I know there's a lot of people that are hearing us talk, and they probably
I'm
want to chime
sure.
in. Right,
I'm
of course.
sure.
I
Can't
like,
wait.
listen, I like different perspective. Obviously, you're a very educated man. We disagree on some things. We agree on some other things, but I do enjoy having these types of conversations. Number to call, 702-221-7283. And again, the number to call if you'd like to be a part of the conversation. You have an opportunity to speak with George Chanos, the former Nevada Attorney General. Not every day you get to do that. 702-221-7283. We've talked about a lot. We've talked about the economy. We've talked about Biden. Obviously, George is not a Joe Biden guy. Most Republicans are not. So I can understand
I'm not
that.
a Republican.
I thought you were.
No, I left the Republican
You
Party
left the Republican
in
Party.
2016 when Donald Trump became the nominee.
See, that I didn't know about you.
Yeah.
But you do.
I'm a nonpartisan since 2016.
Okay, but before then, you were a lifelong Republican. Is that fair to characterize?
Well, I was what they called a rhino, right? Right. So
Yeah, well, they call that anybody that voted to impeach Donald Trump apparently is a rhino. Mitt Romney's a rhino. Liz Cheney is a rhino. If you're not a MAGA Republican, you're out of the party. I do want to talk to you about that when we come back. So we'll take a quick break. Again, that number to call, 702-221-7283, 702-221-SAVE. We're going to take a quick break. We'll take your phone calls on the other side. Joining us, George Chanos will be back right after this. It's Pushing the Limits right here. Much for joining us. If you're just joining us, you missed a lot. We got George Chanos in studio. He's the former Nevada Attorney General, Republican until 2016. He left the party. We've been talking about Vladimir Putin. We've been talking about criticisms of Joe Biden. We've been talking about Donald Trump. And now I'm going to be taking your phone calls, and you get to ask George anything you'd like. The number to call, 702-221-7283, so long as you're respectful, of course. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Let's go to Mike. Mike is first up on Pushing the Limits. Hi, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
Good. You're on with George. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I hear all the negative stuff about Biden, and I was wondering how many of these Republicans that has voted for Trump, how many of them have seen the Comey rule? And if it's true that Trump has been compromised, how many of these people are going to turn around and vote for him anyway?
Well, I'll let George answer that question. Go ahead, George.
How many have seen the what?
Go ahead and repeat the question, Mike.
Did you say the Comey rule?
Yeah, go ahead. I think that's what he said. Mike, go ahead and repeat your question.
There's a thing called the Comey rule. It's a little mini-series on TV.
Oh, okay.
And one of the guys, the main character, was Comey. And he resigned, or he was fired. He was actually fired, I believe, by Trump, being that he said that Trump had been compromised and that he was taking all these orders from Putin.
Yeah, so Mueller did a 3-year investigation at the cost of $50 million in taxpayer funding to find that there was no collusion with Russia. That was a hoax, and it was never substantiated. And so, you know, whatever the mini-series that you may have watched may have told you, a thorough, independent investigation, 3-year investigation, uncovered absolutely no Russian collusion.
So there were, and I'm not saying this, put forth a different outcome of an election. Donald Trump won an election fair and square. He also lost an election fair and square in 2020. There were some Facebook stuff put out there that was proven by the FBI and the CIA, but I don't believe that interfered in the election at all. As far as the Mueller report goes, there are some instances of obstruction. He didn't think that it rose to the level to prosecute him. I think some people might characterize it differently than you did, that it was a nothing burger, but there certainly wasn't anything there that Mueller said, okay, we're going to go after Donald Trump for this, this, or that.
Well, the question was collusion.
Right.
Suggesting that Donald Trump is somehow a Manchurian candidate.
There was no evidence.
There was zero evidence of collusion.
You are correct of that, and I respect Mueller's decision.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that
As
100%. Thank you for the call, sir. Okay, we're going to move on to the next caller. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Let's go to Dave. Dave, you're on with George Chanos, the former Nevada Attorney General. Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead, Dave.
Hi.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Did we lose Dave? Go
Can
ahead,
you
Dave.
hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. This is your most interesting guest that you've had so far, and I wasn't aware of who George Chanos was.
Yeah, it's not to be confused with George Santos. Different George.
I
please.
fully understand.
Chanos.
All right. Just a couple of points. I always taught my students when I taught American history, and I also taught English in high school, ye who sup with the devil have need of a long spoon. And we got to one point in the interview where Mr. Chanos said something about
Chanos.
being able to negotiate with the devil, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You lost me there, George. The devil doesn't negotiate.
Well, it was a figure. It was being figurative. It wasn't being literal.
Well, I understand, and that's what Trump says. You know, it's all those buzzwords, and then they put these big ideas out here, and then they say, "Oh, it's just figurative."
Well,
And
if you're
I understand figurative
yeah,
language
yeah,
as an
yeah.
English teacher. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Then the second point being, figurative language can be used in a very negative sense. Most of the time, it's positive, but it can be used very negatively to make a point. Also, the business about where everything started started with Clinton Lewinsky, and Clinton was the worst thing that ever happened to the Democratic
Okay,
Party.
so I agree, Dave. I'm sorry to cut you off, but ask George a question because I got to get to some other callers, my friend. I agree with what you said about dealing with the devil and all that all that stuff. But do you have a question for George?
Yeah, just for the record,
Yeah,
I don't negotiate with
here's
God
my
or the
question. Here's
devil,
my
or
question.
wasn't referring to either one of those beings.
Yeah.
It was
All right.
any human.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I do have a question. I'm sorry about the long prologue. You mentioned at one point if he has actually committed a crime, then he should be prosecuted for it. And I can't tell you how many times that expression has come out of Trump's mouth. Do you think that he has already committed a crime, or do you think that's still up for grabs?
Well, first of all, I think that you'd have to be more specific in terms of what prosecution you're talking about. January 6th?
January 6th.
Do I believe that he's committed a crime on January 6th?
Gene Carroll, and...
Well, he was found guilty by a jury on Gene Carroll. So
that's
it's
not a crime, though.
Well,
that's not a crime.
Well, I thought he was convicted.
He's found liable.
I'm sorry.
He was found liable.
He was found liable.
Okay. So, do you think that, in your personal opinion, do you think that Donald Trump has committed a crime? Do you think that everybody is wrong that is
I
against
think that's
him
a
right
fair
now?
question. He's facing 91 felony counts.
Yeah. I don't know of a specific crime that has been proven against Donald Trump that, and so until he's been convicted of a crime, he's presumed innocent.
Why did he defy a subpoena for a year then if he didn't do anything wrong?
Why has everyone defied subpoenas?
Well, because they're probably hiding something and they're probably guilty.
Well,
that's why. I think that's a pretty reasonable explanation.
Yeah, but that's not even an.
But George,
that's not even an explanation. So when someone takes the Fifth Amendment, for example,
well,
right?
Donald Trump said it himself. If you take the Fifth Amendment, you're probably guilty.
Yeah, but he was wrong in saying it.
He's wrong in saying a lot of things.
Yeah, but that's the point. And so we're no better in saying the same thing that he shouldn't have said. In saying it with regard to him,
I think Donald Trump was absolutely a part of the fake electorate scheme. I think Donald Trump absolutely, when it came to classified documents, if he cooperated, maybe he's not facing these charges, but he didn't. He's showing classified documents to people that don't have any security clearance. How do we know that for sure? The guilt is on tape. We have audio of Donald Trump showing these documents to people that were in the room that didn't have security clearance.
To me, it's just laughable to talk about someone being guilty of something based on what you're reading in the media.
I heard it. It's audio.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He hasn't had a trial. He hasn't.
You're innocent until proven guilty.
Until
I'm just
proven
giving you
guilty.
my opinion.
Okay, well,
I think he's guilty, and I'll make a bet with anybody that he's going to be prosecuted for at least one felony of the 91.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he's going to be prosecuted for more than one felony.
So will you admit then that he's a felon? If he's a convicted felon, will you say, "Yep, Donald Trump's a convicted felon"?
If he's convicted,
which I believe he will be.
You
just said that you believe he'll be convicted.
No, I did not.
Oh,
say,
I'm sorry.
No,
I thought you just said that.
No, I said that he will absolutely be prosecuted.
Okay.
For more than one felony.
Okay.
But I do not believe that he will be convicted.
Okay.
And that it will be affirmed on appeal.
Okay.
So, for example, he may be convicted.
I got you.
But I do not believe that it would be affirmed on appeal.
I got
so,
you.
for example, for January 6th, I do not believe that there is a sufficient evidence to convict him of a crime with regard to January 6th that would be affirmed on appeal. Okay, that doesn't mean that he would not be convicted
in a dereliction of duty. We
in
agree
a lower
on that.
court.
We
agree that in our opinion, what he did in failing to take corrective action for 5 hours was, in
Gotcha.
my opinion and in yours, a dereliction of duty.
But you would still be comfortable knowing that
Yeah.
that guy being back in the White House.
I would be more comfortable than the guy who let 8 million people come across our border illegally being in the Oval Office.
Okay. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. All I would say to that is I don't think it's a Democrat or a Republican problem. I think it's an American problem, and we've had issues at the border for decades and decades and decades. And while more
There's
people
never been anything like
I
this.
understand. While we have more people that are crossing the border illegally now
More.
more than ever, I would also say
Millions
I,
more.
I understand that.
Yeah, yeah.
I understand
Yeah.
that. Joe
Well-
Biden has not done a good job with border security, but it was Donald Trump that ran in 2016 on I'm going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. 16% of the wall was built and Mexico didn't pay $1 for it. So would you also say that's a failed policy? Promise?
Look, first of all, he didn't have cooperation in building the wall.
And you think Joe Biden does have cooperation?
I think that Joe Biden caused the 8 million people to come over by having an open border policy, by reversing all of the executive orders that Trump had signed.
I don't agree with what he did there.
We used to have amnesty. You would wait across the border in Mexico. Joe Biden reversed that and allowed all those people to come into the United States and then gave them trial dates on their amnesty 10 years in advance, which is obscene.
Which I don't agree with.
Yeah,
And
but
that
it's
was
even,
also a failure.
But it's even worse than that. It's even worse than that, because when you get into a pissing contest with Russia and China, right, and then you allow 8 million people to come across the border, God knows how many of those people are terrorists, right? They just encountered a large group of Chinese men, all men, right, trying to come across the border as a group, like many dozens of them, right? How many of these, if you're China and you are, and we've reversed our policy towards China, a 50-plus year policy towards China, we've done a 180-degree turn. We're, supporting a war with Russia. China is engaged with Russia in a no-limits policy. How is having all of these people from China coming in across our border not a potential security threat?
All I would say to that is that you have a better chance of being the victim of a crime per capita by someone who's a legal citizen of this country than somebody who is undocumented, number one. And I would say, number two, to what you just said, more people in this country are here illegally because they overstay their visas, not because they cross the border illegally. I don't hear from both sides on that issue at all.
It's not an either or. It's
No, I agree. We should do both.
Every country has a right to have
Yeah.
a secure border,
I
right?
don't
And an
disagree.
obligation to its
Yes.
citizens to have a secure
Understood.
border, right? And I'm in favor of immigration. I think that we have a labor crisis. I think we need increased labor. We ought to have a robust immigration system.
And listen,
But
Joe
not
Biden,
an illegal one.
I hear you. Joe
Yeah.
Biden's not done a good job at the border.
He's done
Okay.
a horrendous job.
Understood.
Yeah.
But I would still, and again, this is where we disagree. I don't want Orange Man in office ever again. I think he's a threat to our democracy. I'm not saying Joe Biden's perfect either, but if I have to choose, I would go with Joe. All right, let's take some phone calls.
I choose the guy who hasn't gotten us into war.
Well, he didn't get us into war, but would you blame Donald Trump for COVID? That did happen
No.
under him, but you don't put responsibility on him for that. China created COVID
No.
under Donald
No.
Trump.
Joe Biden, his policies made war in Ukraine inevitable. His policies and his support of NATO's policies towards Russia made war in Ukraine
You don't have a problem with Donald
inevitable.
Trump saying that he wants to get us out of NATO and persuading Vladimir Putin the other day to do whatever they want to do to attack our NATO allies, and that's the guy you want as president?
There's a lot more going on with NATO than we have time to talk about here.
I hear you, but
Yeah.
the president who you say you would vote for, and you're entitled to your opinion,
Yeah.
said persuading Vladimir Putin, who I characterize as an evil, murderous dictator. I know you don't, but that's okay.
No, it's not that I don't.
No, I get it. But he said, George, he's persuading Vladimir Putin to go after our allies in NATO.
Yeah.
That has to bother you, George.
Yeah, well, if to the extent that he said it, right, it of course it bothers me, just like many of the other absurd, obscene things that he's said bother me,
Right.
But I don't make decisions based on comments like that.
I believe him.
I don't believe it for a minute.
All right. So you're saying you would support a guy who says things on a world stage, but we shouldn't believe him.
I would support a guy who is adverse to war and more inclined to negotiate peaceful resolutions than a guy who has already shown that he is getting us into war and causing increased global conflict.
All right, let's take some more calls. We have a fan of yours that's calling.
Okay.
702-221-7283. Let's go to Julie. Hello, Julie. Our MAGA supporter, Julie, calling in. Hello, Julie.
Yes, Miss Maga. Hi, George. How are you? I'm enjoying your conversation. I have to congratulate you because you are brilliant. I agree with you. I'm Cuban American, and I understand everything that you're saying because I know what is happening in Ukraine. I know what is happening with NATO. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
We are a little short of time, and I know that hey, anybody that compliments me or George, I'm happy to hear it.
Yes.
But you have a question
and
for
I
George.
know, sure, George. And I know that Ukraine has been the most corrupt country in the world.
That's not true. That's
before
ridiculous.
this conflict.
That's not true. Julie, you can't say things like that. Ukraine is not the most corrupt country in the world. That's absurd. If you think people in Ukraine are corrupt, that's one thing, George. You can't say Ukraine's the most corrupt country in the world. That's insane.
Can I talk to George?
Well,
yes, go ahead.
You can
go ahead.
talk to George, but that's a ridiculous statement.
Go ahead.
If you have a question for George, that'd be great.
George, I am very worried because recently San Francisco appointed a non-citizen to be in the election commission. And she gave, her name is Kelly Won, and she gave a Mandarin speech, and that is
Julie,
very
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have a lot of other
country.
people on hold. Do you have a question for George?
Yes. Okay, George, I just wanted to call to say thank you.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Thank you for calling in, Julie, and I'm sure George appreciates the call. It'd be
Thank
nice
you,
if you had a
Julie.
question for him, but thank you. Ukraine is not the most corrupt country in the world. That's absurd. 702-221-7283. George, you have a new fan.
Yeah.
Even though George isn't running for office, he's done. I don't blame him, by the way. Let's go to Steve. Steve is next up on Pushing the Limits. Hi, Steve. You're on with George. Go right ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Brian? My question for George is, there's another part of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and that would be giving aid or comfort to the enemy. And wouldn't you agree promising these January 6th insurrectionists would be giving aid or comfort when you promise that they'll get pardoned?
No, I don't think that is aid and comfort to the enemy. They're American citizens who broke the law, and they're serving their time, and the President of the United States has the authority to grant pardons. Bill Clinton granted pardons. Joe Biden will no doubt pardon his son on the way out. Presidents pardon people. And so, no, I don't think that's giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Thank you for your question.
Can you name another president that would offer or has given a pardon to any insurrectionists, people that tried to overthrow the government?
I don't think that they tried to overthrow the government. I think that's yeah.
Well, you and George are going to have to disagree on that one. Yeah. I obviously disagree with George with some of the people that were there on that one, but I appreciate the call.
We agree
Steve.
that they broke the law.
Absolutely.
That's it.
I do believe thank you for the call, Steve. I appreciate you. I do believe some of the people that were there that day truly wanted to overthrow our government, and they wanted to change the outcome of a free and fair election.
They may have wanted to, but they had no chance in hell of doing anything, so it wasn't real.
So if they had no chance of doing it, but they still attempted to do it, wouldn't that still be an attempted insurrection?
That's not an actual attempt. If there's no possible way that they could possibly succeed, how is that even a legitimate attempt? It's like me saying I'm attempting to fly to the moon. I want to fly to the moon. I'm going to jump off the side of this building and I'm going to fly up to the moon. Is that an attempt to fly to the moon?
If you physically assaulted police officers.
No, it's not.
Well, if you physically assaulted police officers, tried to gouge their eyes out, hit them with pepper spray, defecated on Nancy Pelosi's desk.
If you had shot the police officer, that's not an attempt to overthrow the government. That's a murder. It's not an attempt to overthrow the government.
All right. Well,
right?
I mean, like I said, I think we agree on this. There's a lot of people that committed some heinous crimes that day. Officers were hurt, injured.
Yeah.
People died that day.
Yeah. And I think there were a lot of people that were responsible, you know?
And it was an embarrassing day for the country.
And Trump was one of them.
Sure.
Trump was one of them, but there were probably others, right? Nancy Pelosi played a role. However you want to quantify it. She was in charge of the Capitol at that point. She could have had increased security. The Trump administration asked for it. She didn't provide it.
That's been investigated.
Yeah.
And Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, there's a new video that came out where they're actually asking for that. I'm pretty sure that that's been debunked.
What about, do you think there was any entrapment? Do you think there was any FBI involvement in this?
So here's what I think, and I don't like conspiracy theories, and I know you don't like them either. When you have hundreds of thousands of people that are gathering, there's going to be agents in the crowd, and that doesn't mean that they coerced or helped people commit violent crimes.
Do you actually believe none did?
It's not what I believe. It's that there's no
wait a
evidence
second.
of
Well,
it.
okay, so
Where's the evidence?
Well, wait a second, because earlier in our conversation you were saying a lot of things that you believe,
Sure,
for which you had no evidence, right?
Well, let's go back to it.
So I have no evidence, and I gladly admit I have no evidence.
So what did I say earlier in the show?
I don't even remember.
You don't remember?
I don't
Okay,
remember.
so what I try to do is I try to form opinions based on evidence and facts.
Yeah.
Trump's a criminal. He's going to be a convicted
What-
felon.
where are the
How do I know
facts?
that?
Where
Sure.
are the facts?
There's audio on tape
Yeah.
of him showing the most classified documents to people that had no security clearance.
Yeah.
There's evidence. Hold on.
Wait,
I'm gonna answer your question.
wait. There's evidence that
I'm gonna
Hillary
answer.
Clinton put 33,000 emails and gave them to Weiner
Okay.
and put them on his
So
laptop,
here's the difference
right?
legally, and you know this. The FBI didn't start investigating her. That was before the FBI started to investigate her. She didn't break the law by doing that. So, for example, if you cleared your cell phone right now, that would not be a crime. If the FBI is investigating, then that's obstruction. She cleared emails before the FBI started to investigate her. That is not a crime.
No, I don't believe that's accurate.
Okay, well, you cannot believe it.
I don't
but-
believe it's accurate. I believe there was a subpoena for that information.
Okay, but it was
Before.
cleared before.
No.
Okay, well, you can go
I don't-
back.
I don't
you-
believe that's
You can
true.
go back and look at that, but I want actual evidence. And the bottom line is, if Donald Trump didn't say that the election was stolen, if he didn't lie, which by the way he continues to lie, it was a free and fair election.
First of all, that's not a crime. That's not a crime. To say that you think that the election was stolen, it's the expression of an
I didn't say
opinion.
it was a crime. But
Okay.
January 6th doesn't happen if the man isn't lying
he
about
isn't-
the election.
if he
It's an
isn't-
attack on our democracy.
Listen, he's expressing his opinion. So let's put out a hypothetical.
Okay.
Let's say that he genuinely believed, okay, that he did not believe he was lying.
Which I don't
okay?
believe that.
Well, let's say that he genuinely believed that the election was stolen. Wouldn't it have been his duty to say that, right? Wouldn't it have been, if he actually believed, if he's president
I'll
of the
answer
United
that.
States,
I'll answer that.
if he is president of the
It is
United
the
States,
duty of the President of the United States to not put out false and fake information.
And-
Just because somebody is a crazy person that is a narcissist and believes, well, he is. I mean, let's just be honest here. You don't believe Donald Trump is a narcissist and a liar?
I called him a narcissistic
Okay,
buffoon
so we
in
agree.
2016.
So we agree. Just because a crazy lunatic believes something doesn't mean it's their duty to tell the American people.
No.
January 6th doesn't happen if the man isn't a despicable liar.
Well, you're calling him a liar, but
yeah.
my hypothetical is he believes in what he's saying.
I don't think that. You had everybody
Wait
around
a second.
him.
How can you say he's a narcissist?
Here's why.
How can you say he's a pathological narcissist?
Sure.
And then not accept the possibility that he believed in the truth of what he was saying?
Here's why. Based on evidence and testimony from everybody that has been around him that told him, no, Mr. President, you did not win.
Yeah, but that's not good enough.
Then he's unfit to be president,
It doesn't
George.
matter. That's not the
That's
point.
the guy you want to be president?
That's not the point.
Well, I think it's a very important point.
No,
You're
because
willing-
you're moving around. You're moving around from argument to argument. Stick with the argument.
The argument
the
is
question, no. The question is, did he knowingly lie about the election being stolen? And my point is, perhaps not. Perhaps he's is enough of a narcissist to actually, in his heart, believe in what he was saying was truthful.
Okay, let's go with that.
All right?
If that's true.
Okay. So then he would not be a liar. Okay, he would be a delusional person who is saying something that is false or unproven or unsubstantiated.
Best case
but
scenario.
he wouldn't be a knowing liar.
Best case scenario.
Don't
He's
you think?
delusional?
Yeah, but don't
and
you
want
think,
a delusional person running?
Don't
the
you
country.
think? Don't you think? Well, rather than a guy who can't find his way around and is getting us into war and is acting as commander in chief and inviting.
What do you mean
conflict,
he can't find his way around?
He can't. The guy can't find his way around a stage. I mean, look at him on television. He seems cognitively impaired.
I disagree with you. And in the last month, let's go with that.
Yeah.
In the last month, Donald Trump has confused Nancy Pelosi with Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
He said you need ID. You're right. It is funny. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He said you need ID to buy bread. He said Jeb Bush got us into a war in Iraq. This is a man who is not right.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to make the case that
you can find dozens of these
absolutely.
on both of these
so
guys.
So why don't I hear you
both
say
of these
that about
guys.
Donald Trump?
Let me ask you a question. You do hear me say that. I've said it many times over the last 8 years about Donald Trump.
To me, in my opinion, the things he says and he does. Okay,
let
Joe
me ask
Biden,
you.
he
Let me
fumbles
wait,
over
wait,
his
wait.
words.
Let me ask you a question. Let me give you a hypothetical.
Sure. Go for it.
Because I don't know how much time we have, and I
got
still
about 15 minutes, and I still have to promote your book.
Okay, all right. So let me ask.
And we got callers.
Let me give you a hypothetical.
Sure.
Okay. You walk into a restaurant, right? I'm a waiter.
Okay.
I come up to your table and I present you with 2 plates. One is red and one is blue, right? Mm-hmm. On both of these plates, I have a stack of shit on both of these plates. And I tell you, which one would you like? Are you and your guests going to be arguing and debating over which shit you should select?
Sure, I'll answer that.
Which shit is better? Or are you going to throw the plates up?
Sure, I'll answer that.
Never come back to the restaurant and get to the real issue, which
I'll
is
answer it.
why are you serving us shit and shit?
I'll answer that.
Okay.
I don't characterize Joe Biden the way you do.
Yeah.
I don't always agree with him.
Yeah.
I think he's too old to be president. I'd like somebody younger in office.
Well,
but I don't consider Joe Biden the way you consider him. I think he's a decent man, an educated man. I have respect for, of course, Beau and his wife, who actually has an education.
Yeah.
Again, too old. I don't think they're comparable. Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy. I think he's a rapist, quite frankly.
God.
Wait, when you say, oh my God, he's a liable rapist.
Yeah.
A jury decided, a jury of his peers in court, that he is liable for sexual abuse.
Yeah.
There's 25 women that have accused Donald Trump of sexual assault or rape, including his ex-wife, in court documents. No. What did Donald Trump do? He paid her off. He's a man who dodged the military. Yes, I do believe he's a liable rapist, and I don't think he cares about anybody else but himself. Doesn't mean Joe Biden's perfect. Doesn't mean I don't want other people in there. Yeah. But I am not going to put the two together. Hold on, let me just finish. Yeah. I'm not going to put the two together and say that they're both crap. Okay. No, Joe Biden is a decent man who's lived an honorable life.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he is.
Would your opinion change? If you had evidence? And I don't have evidence. Okay. But would your opinion change if he was involved, not only involved, but involved in orchestrating his son's activities?
Which, by the way, hasn't been proven.
No, I already said.
Okay, so why would we talk about that?
Would your opinion change?
If Joe Biden was involved in Hunter Biden's business dealings and broke the law, then I wanted him held to account.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about orchestrating it. Taking a crack-addicted son and making him your bag man. Would your opinion change?
Well, his son is a citizen. He's not in politics, and here's what we know for sure. If you want to talk about members of family members...
I'm asking... No. I don't want to go into Jared
Kushner.
I know all about it.
My opinion, if he... and I think the word orchestrated is a very loose term.
If he was responsible...
Yeah.
If he was responsible, that if Hunter would not have been doing but for his encouragement and consent... Would your opinion change?
Then
and again, this is a hypothetical.
Then
There's no evidence of it whatsoever.
Understood. Okay.
Not
so
claiming that there is.
If that was true,
would your opinion
change?
I
would not want him to ever hold office again.
However,
I still would not compare the man, Joe Biden. That would be a mistake. And by the way, it's a hypothetical.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't compare him to Donald Trump the way you did. Here's what I would say to that. We know that Jared Kushner.
I know all about it.
Okay, you know all about it.
I know all about it.
But that's the guy you want in office.
No.
Well, there's no evidence that Joe Biden committed a crime, yet Jared Kushner received $2.1 billion from the Saudis.
I know all about that.
Donald Trump's daughter received $600 million from the Chinese government.
Yeah.
This isn't opinion. This
yeah.
is fact. What you said is hypothetical.
Well, wait.
What I'm saying is actual things that happened.
No. It's not hypothetical that Hunter Biden received $20 million. That's not hypothetical.
Okay, but that's not breaking the law.
We have no connection between Joe Biden and Hunter Biden that's definitive yet.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
We have no connection between Jared and his daughter and
we do. The Saudi prince already admitted that business deal already took place. He didn't send Mike Pompeo to Saudi Arabia. He sent Jared Kushner.
Wait a second. I'm saying you can't link Donald Trump to that deal any more than you can link Joe Biden to Hunter's deal.
Wait a second. First of all, Hunter wasn't working in Joe Biden's administration. There are no laws that say you can't take advantage of who your father is. Number two, Jared Kushner was working in Donald Trump's administration. He didn't send Mike Pompeo to Saudi Arabia. He sent Jared Kushner there. And then 3 months later, they write him a $2.1 billion check. And you're telling me, and you could look into my eyes and tell me that Donald Trump had nothing to do with that? You're too smart of a guy not to admit that.
You're telling me throughout this conversation that you want evidence, right?
That is evidence.
No, you have no evidence. You have no evidence. You have no evidence that he had any involvement in any of that.
So that had nothing to do with Donald Trump when he sent Jared Kushner over there 3 months before getting $2.1 billion.
You have no evidence of
I think that's evidence, but
the transaction.
We would respectfully disagree on that. But I want to promote your book. Got to take a few more calls, and we got to do it rapidly because we can do this forever, and I'm enjoying it.
Let's do it.
Let's go to Roy. Roy is next on Pushing the Limits. What's up, Roy? I got about 1 minute. Go ahead, Roy.
How you doing? I don't agree with a lot of what you said, George. I do understand some of it. I'm not smart enough to know about some of the things with Ukraine. But Donald Trump cares only about himself, not the American people. And to me, the President of the United States also has to have something called good character. You can't tell me that this man has any kind of good character or good in him at all. I just can't. I don't like Biden to be the president again because I think he's a little bit too old. Mm-hmm. But he's a human being. Donald Trump is human garbage, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Well, let George respond to
that. I respect your opinion. I think that both of these men lack the moral authority to serve as president of the United States. Okay? We'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you for the call. I got to get to some other calls, Roy. Let's go to Robert. Robert is next. What's up, Robert?
Yes, hello?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
I wanted to make a point to George when he said that the insurrectionists should be released because they didn't finish their insurrection. Yes, there are crimes. You can be arrested for attempting. Police don't let attempted murderers or attempted kidnappers go. These people almost strung up Mike Pence.
First of all, I didn't say anybody should be released before serving their sentence. Mm-hmm. I said that a president has the authority to pardon someone. Right. But absent a pardon, they should serve their sentence.
Right.
Right. And that brings me to my second point. You said that Biden would pardon Hunter on his way out. For what? He hasn't been charged with any crimes.
He will be.
He got charged with tax evasion. That's it. But he paid those back and the interest. But he hasn't. Every time you start a sentence with if, that is conjecture and supposition and nothing else.
There's no if. He will be.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens down the road.
Okay,
it may not happen during this administration.
And you keep hope in your heart, but
I'm not hoping. I don't have a dog in that fight.
It's just his opinion that he believes Hunter. And guess what? If Hunter Biden is charged with a crime and if he's prosecuted, I want him held to the highest extent of the law. Yeah. If that does happen, I would say that about anybody in this country.
So would I.
And I know you would
too.
He
committed the crime. Yes, I agree.
All right.
But
Thank
again,
you for the call, sir. I appreciate that. We're going to try to do rapid fire here because a lot of people want to ask you questions, George. Let's go to RJ. RJ is next up on Pushing the Limits. Hi, RJ.
A lot of people want to ask you questions, George.
RJ, are you not ready? RJ was not ready. There's a little delay when we're live on the air. Okay, let's go to RJ. Go ahead, RJ. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Sorry about that, RJ. Go right ahead. That was our fault. Go ahead.
Okay. Just a couple things I want to ask him. The thing is, all the money that he's getting from the campaign, and if he might be able to use that money to pay for his legal, couldn't he get in big trouble for that, Trump?
Well, okay, so, first of all, a lot of these prosecutions are politically motivated. So I don't believe in the legitimacy in a number of these prosecutions. I believe that they're politically motivated, and they're being brought by partisan hacks. So your question is, can he use his campaign funds for his legal defense? That's a campaign finance question that you'd have to consult a campaign finance lawyer on. I'm not a campaign finance lawyer.
Fair
I
enough.
don't know on a federal election what he can do with that money and what he can't.
And guess what, George? This might surprise you. Neither do I.
Yeah.
Let's go to one more call. Let's go to Ricardo. Hi, Ricardo. Thanks for calling into
Hey,
Pushing
how
the
you
Limits.
doing?
What's on your mind, Ricardo?
How you doing? This is for Mr. George.
Yes.
This is for Mr. George. When he was saying that Donald Trump believed in his heart that the election was stolen, why did he call his Georgia state official and ask for 11,000 plus votes?
Okay, so that's a good question. That's a good question. So when a guy is calling the Secretary of State of Georgia and saying that I need 11,000 votes to turn this around, all right? He's not saying to the guy, I need you to falsify 11,000 votes. You may read that way, but the language, what he actually said
I need you to find.
I need you to find errors in 11,000 votes. Now, if they're out there, find them. Please find them. That's not illegal. That's asking for, what he felt had happened and what he would need to correct the situation.
And Brad Raffensperger has already said that there was no, widespread voter fraud there, and everything was fair and square.
If he had said something differently, if he had said, "I want you to change,"
right,
11,000 votes, or I want you to
hence fake electorates.
I want you to,
which I believe he was a part
commit
of.
fraud with regard to 11,000 votes. That would be very different.
Agree.
That would be very different. And on the fake electorates, that's an interesting question because, if he knew that what he was doing with the fake electorate scheme was illegal, as opposed to being advised by a guy like John Eastman that this is a legitimate way to allow the vice president to have this ability to,
which he didn't,
change the course of the election. If the lawyers were telling him that, right, then he's deferring to the advice that he received. Now, I would prosecute the lawyer if he was giving false.
I'd prosecute everybody involved.
Information.
I understand what you're saying. So let me, because we're running out of time here. First of all, I appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
It's been a good conversation. You're also an author. You've written 2 books.
Yeah.
But I want to start by talking to you about your organization, Uvolution.io, which is an organization, my understanding, building a program to change people's lives. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what I see happening is that there is a tsunami of technological change that is coming, right? And, all the great minds in this country are talking about it, right? So Stephen Hawking said in 2014 that the singularity would be the greatest event in human history, greater than fire, greater than the wheel. Ray Kurzweil of Google says that it's coming by 2029. That's 5 years away. That's a massive amount of disruption that I believe is going to occur. Today, millions of people are flocking to personal empowerment resources that I believe are in large part very predatory, right? They bring people in, they sell them courses that they don't need, they pile on debt, they have them take out loans. They're very predatory, right? I believe people need help. They need inspiration. They need guidance. They need direction. And I believe the answer to everyone moving forward is very simple. The government is not going to save you. The government is not coming. The cavalry is not coming. The answer is people helping people, right? So there are people that have accomplished a great deal in life, right? They've had great success in whatever endeavor. They're an Olympic athlete. They've won a gold medal. They've built a company to a multi-billion-dollar company, right? These people, many of them are at a point in their life that they want to give back. They want to help other people, right? And I believe that they can. If you look at, going back to medieval times, the apprentice ships that existed, where if you wanted to be a blacksmith, you worked under a blacksmith, right? So I believe it's incumbent upon my generation, baby boomers, to empower subsequent generations, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z. That's what Uvolution.io is all about. It's bringing together a multi-generational mix of people who have accomplished a great deal in their lives, now want to give back, and want to empower younger generations to make them more formidable, more resilient, more anti-fragile, more successful.
And the website is Uvolution, obviously starting with a U, uvolution.io. So
Correct.
if people want more information on this, well, I'll tell you, I would love for you to come back and talk more about this. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. And I would love for you to come back and talk about the 2 books that you wrote. Unfortunately, we run out of time here. But
so the other thing that they should know is they can go, so the book, most recent book, millennialsamurai.com, they can go to millennialsamurai.com and they can download the entire book for free.
Oh, wow.
For free. It's a
cool.
It's a 444-page book. They can download the entire thing for free at millennialsamurai.com. They can go to uvolution.io. We will have very affordable programs for people as little as $9 a month.
Oh, wow.
And if they can't afford $9 a month, write us and tell us why you can't afford it, and we'll make it available for free.
It's interesting, George. We can disagree on some issues, but when you do these types of things, helping people, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or what your opinions are on politics, and I applaud you for doing that. You were a very good Attorney General. I had just moved to Vegas